We work with national civil society organisations. They might be individual NGOs or it might be platforms, coalitions, networks, helping them think through how they organise, developing their strategies, how they do their work, how they manage the people who work for them and so forth. We focus on organisations that work on forest governance, which is where the connection with FLEGT comes in, and organisations that have some kind of strategic impact in their country, and also organisations that work on community rights, natural resource rights of local communities, Indigenous people. I think a really interesting challenge is that when civil society organisations first start getting involved in these kinds of issues, they see the chance to participate as being what it's about. So at the beginning, quite often organisations will go, we've participated in this fantastically because we were at this meeting or we were at this workshop or we were at this negotiation. And then a bit later on they start to go, hang on, have we actually had an effect as we participate? And that's when you can start getting into supporting organisations to think strategically about what are we going to be arguing for, what points do we want to make. We don't just have to be there, we have to be there to have an effect. And that takes quite a time, because at the beginning, when an organisation gets an opportunity to get a seat at the table, that's already such a big step for many groups that it sort of stops there. For example, we've been working with a network in DRC who work with Indigenous people. And they were realising, as they were involved in policy discussions, that they weren't really representing what people in communities were saying. They didn't have strong enough links there. So we ended up doing a lot of work with them around participatory approaches, around working with communities, around building a community voice so that they could then present that at a policy level, which has been a really interesting process and quite challenging for some organisations to push that. And then another area is, I think, the dynamics of how organisations work together and helping organisations get past the point where everybody has to be present at a meeting and choosing representatives and thinking hard about how do you choose representatives, how do you support them so that they have something to say, how do you enable them to put civil society's message, not just to put an individual message, and how do you enable them to feed that back? So all of those are really important questions. The VPA process creates a space in the negotiation for civil society. The insistence that civil society is there is great. That's a really positive step. The challenge comes when you move from negotiation to implementation. And quite a lot of the organisations we work with struggle with that. We've been involved in the negotiation, there's been a common committee who've been managing this, we've seen where we can be involved, and when it gets to implementation, then that becomes problematic. And it's about ensuring that civil society organisations realise that they can participate in official processes, but they can also still initiate, suggest, propose ideas during implementation. And I think certain organisations are doing that. They're picking up, they're developing projects, and they're coming back to the government and holding them to account. You agree to this feuille de route, what's happening now, where are we with it? Well, I mean, one organisation that I've known actually for a very long time, and I would say that most of their development is due to their own initiative and their hard work, but FODE, who work in Cameroon, have been very actively involved in the negotiation, and they've now been moving into, as I was saying about implementation, they're starting to say, all right, we're going to support communities to monitor, we're going to start producing information and holding our government to account for what they've committed to. And I think the reasons why they've been able to develop is that they've got a strong team and they share responsibilities between them. It isn't all concentrated in one person, so there's a mixture of skills and a mixture of competencies. And that's one really important thing. Some other organisations struggle quite often because there's one person who is in charge, who controls all the information, who doesn't necessarily share, whereas the ones that are working well are ones that are building teams of people who can do exciting stuff.